2 decades after their marriage ended, Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston are still one of the most talked-about pairs in Hollywood history, and in 2026, the conversation around them hasn't cooled down one bit. Every time one of them mentions the other, even in passing, it becomes a headline. So what's actually true about where these two stand today, after everything they've been through? Let's go back to the beginning and trace how two of the biggest stars in the world went from newlyweds to strangers to, somehow, friends again. Long before Jennifer Aniston entered the picture, Brad Pitt was already one of the most talked-about young actors in Hollywood. Through the late 80s and early 90s, he moved through a string of high-profile relationships that kept him in the tabloids even before his career fully took off. He dated actress Robin Givens briefly, then had a short relationship with Jill Schoelen, whom he met while working together on a film set. After that came his relationship with Juliette Lewis, a pairing that drew attention partly because of their age difference and partly because of how public it became during the years they were together. Then, in the mid-90s, everything shifted when he met Gwyneth Paltrow on the set of Seven. That relationship moved quickly and seriously. By 1996 the two were engaged, and for a while it looked like Pitt had found the partner he'd settled down with. But the engagement didn't hold, and by 1997 it was over, closing another chapter in a dating history that had already made him one of the most closely watched men in the industry. It was against that backdrop that Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston were introduced in the mid-90s, reportedly through their talent agents. Both were coming off recent breakups, and the timing lined up in a way that felt almost scripted. Their relationship developed relatively quickly, and they kept a fairly low profile at first before confirming things publicly in 1998. The following years turned them into one of the most photographed couples on the planet. Pitt proposed in 1999, and in the summer of 2000 they married in a much-covered ceremony in Malibu, attended by friends and family from across the industry. For the next several years, they were treated as Hollywood's golden couple. Aniston was in the middle of her run on Friends, one of the most successful sitcoms ever made, and Pitt's film career was hitting new heights. Their public appearances, their production company Plan B, and even a cameo Pitt made on Friends in 2001 all became part of the cultural memory of that era. That guest appearance, in which Pitt played a former classmate who despised Aniston's character, remains one of the most talked-about celebrity cameos in the show's history and earned him an Emmy nomination. But the marriage that looked so solid from the outside had its own quiet strains. Reports at the time pointed to differing views on family planning and the pressures of two enormous careers running in parallel. By January 2005, the couple announced their separation in a joint statement, describing it as a mutual decision rather than the result of any scandal. Aniston filed for divorce a few months later, and by October of that year the marriage was legally over. It was a significant moment in pop culture, not because divorces among celebrities were rare, but because this particular split felt like the end of something the public had genuinely invested in. What followed turned an already major story into one of the most dissected relationship triangles in modern entertainment history. Photographs surfaced showing Pitt with his Mr. and Mrs. Smith co-star Angelina Jolie, taken not long after his separation from Aniston became public. The timing fueled intense speculation, and even though both Pitt and Jolie denied any romantic involvement while filming, the public narrative had already taken shape. Jolie later confirmed in an interview that the connection between them had developed during the making of that film, which only intensified the scrutiny both women faced in very different ways. Aniston, for her part, largely avoided commenting on the specifics in real time, though she did speak candidly to Vanity Fair not long after the divorce, saying she hoped one day they could be friends again and that she didn't regret the years they'd spent together. It was a notably gracious response given the circumstances, and it set the tone for how she would handle the years of public attention that followed. Pitt and Jolie's relationship became one of the defining celebrity partnerships of the following decade. They built a large family together, adopting children from Cambodia, Ethiopia, and Vietnam, and having 3 biological children of their own. They used their platform for humanitarian work around the world, and for years they were treated less like a typical Hollywood couple and more like a global institution. In 2014, after nearly a decade together, they married privately in France in a ceremony their children took part in planning. But the marriage that had seemed so durable didn't last. Just 2 years later, in September 2016, Jolie filed for divorce, and what followed was a long, difficult, and very public legal battle over custody of their children and control of shared business interests, including a winery the two had owned together. Pitt has spoken publicly in the years since about his struggles with alcohol during that period and his decision to get sober, and disputes between him and Jolie over their children and assets continued in the courts for years afterward, well past the divorce filing itself. While Pitt's second marriage was unraveling in headlines, Aniston had spent the years since her own divorce building a life that increasingly earned her respect for how she handled it. She leaned into her career, took on roles that showed range beyond the character she was best known for, and largely kept her personal reflections private rather than using interviews to settle scores. In 2012, she began a relationship with actor and writer Justin Theroux, and the two married in 2015 in a small ceremony that caught much of the industry off guard. That marriage ended in 2018, and once again Aniston moved through the aftermath with the same composure she'd shown a decade earlier, never publicly disparaging either of the men she'd been married to. As the years went by, the story between Pitt and Aniston quietly shifted from tabloid tragedy to something closer to mutual respect. In 2019, Pitt attended Aniston's 50th birthday party, mingling with mutual friends from their overlapping circles in the industry. Then came a moment that reignited public fascination almost overnight. At the 2020 Screen Actors Guild Awards, cameras caught the two sharing a warm, clearly genuine exchange backstage, and the clips spread everywhere within hours. Later that same year, they appeared together in a virtual charity table read of Fast Times at Ridgemorne High, playing opposite each other in scenes that had fans buzzing about their easy chemistry, even as both made clear in later comments that they viewed each other as friends and colleagues rather than anything more. In the years since, Aniston has spoken about Pitt occasionally and always in a similarly relaxed way. During an appearance on Howard Stern's radio show, she described their relationship in simple terms, saying that the two remain friends and that there's nothing unusual about it beyond how much attention it draws. Earlier this year, during a joint conversation with her longtime friend and former Friends co-star Lisa Kudrow for Variety's Actors on Actors series, the two reminisced about the show's most memorable guest stars, and Pitt's cameo came up naturally as one of the standout moments, with Kudrow recalling how funny that episode was and Aniston agreeing warmly. It's a small moment, but it reflects something bigger. At this point, Pitt is simply part of Aniston's history that she can talk about comfortably, without the tension that once surrounded any mention of his name. As for where each of them stands personally right now, both have moved on in their own ways. Pitt has been in a relationship with jewelry designer Ines de Ramon since 2022, and reporting has suggested he's in no hurry toward marriage despite the relationship having grown close with his family. Aniston, meanwhile, confirmed her relationship with hypnotherapist Jim Curtis in 2025, and the two have been increasingly open about their relationship since, including marking their first anniversary together. Multiple outlets have reported this year that there's chatter about the two exes and their current partners potentially spending time together socially, sometimes framed as a hoped-for double date, though it's worth being clear that much of this specific reporting comes from unnamed sources and entertainment tabloids rather than confirmed statements from Pitt or Aniston themselves. What is confirmed, through their own words in interviews, is simpler and in some ways more meaningful than any tabloid narrative. They consider each other friends, they speak warmly about their shared past, and neither has shown any interest in rewriting or hiding the history they built together. Meanwhile, Pitt's more recent chapter has been shaped heavily by the drawn-out legal disputes with Jolie, which have continued over custody arrangements and shared business ventures well after their divorce was finalized, creating a much more contentious dynamic than the one he now shares with his first wife. That contrast hasn't gone unnoticed by fans or by entertainment reporters, many of whom have pointed out that Pitt's relationship with Aniston, forged so long ago and tested by one of the most public divorces in Hollywood history, has settled into something calmer and more straightforward than either of his subsequent long-term relationships. What makes the Pitt and Aniston story endure isn't a secret reunion or a hidden romance rekindling behind the scenes. It's the fact that two people who once built a very public life together, who went through an equally public and painful split, managed years later to arrive somewhere calmer. They've each spoken, in their own separate interviews over the years, about valuing what they shared and about not wanting to erase it. Aniston has called him a friend in plain, unglamorous terms. Pitt has referenced their years together as something that still matters to him. Neither has tried to dramatize it into something it isn't, and maybe that restraint is part of why the public still cares so much. In an industry defined by short attention spans and constant reinvention, watching two people quietly hold on to respect for each other, decades after the world assumed they'd have nothing left to say, is rarer than any headline about a secret confession could ever be. So while the tabloids will likely keep speculating about double dates, on-screen reunions, and whatever comes next, the more grounded truth is this. Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston are two people in their late 50s and early 60s who built something real once, lost it publicly, and found a way to stay connected without turning it into spectacle. Whether that's a quiet friendship maintained out of genuine fondness, or simply two people who've made peace with a complicated shared history, it's a more human story than any of the noise around it suggests. And for a couple whose split once dominated every magazine cover in the country, ending up as two people who can sit backstage at an award show, laugh about an old sitcom cameo, and call each other friends without any of the old bitterness might be the most quietly remarkable outcome of all.